collaboration between the Center for Teaching and Learning in the Okanagan and instructors looking to integrate GenAI into their assignments. Before we begin, we would like to respectfully acknowledge that the Center for Teaching and Learning is situated on the traditional and unceded territory of the Syilx Okanagan people. We are humbled and grateful to be living and learning from this beautiful land and its ancestral caretakers. So just taking a moment to appreciate that. Today's agenda begins with an introduction by myself, followed by two key presentations. The first one will be Andrea and Anita on their experience so far in integrating GenAI into a writing assignment, followed by Yves sharing his experience so far in exploring GenAI integration into a coding assignment. To close, summary and discussion will be led by my CTL colleague, Barbara. Quick context for how this project came to be. CTL had a call for collaboration to see how we could be of support and learn about the kinds of questions that instructors were asking as they explored the integration of GenAI. Some of the themes in the questions that arose during our discussions can be seen here. It was important for us to enter the collaboration with an experimental mindset. There were and still are a lot of unknowns regarding the tool. Information, capabilities, guidelines were co-evolving simultaneous to the development of these projects. For example, something as basic as the name of the tool evolving from Bing to Copilot or Google Bard to Gemini, to bigger considerations such as the simultaneous evolving of institutional policies around the use of the tool. So there was a lot of learning that was happening in tandem with things that were happening around the tool. So given this, we moved forward with design thinking framework in our collaboration, which is namely an iterative, nonlinear process to support exploring complex challenges that lack a clear solution and even boundaries. And another commitment that we made is using Copilot rather than, say, ChatGPT, for example, as it better meets UBC PIA guidelines. We asked a lot of questions, and before moving on to our two main presenters to speak about their experiences, we'll share a brief overview of two resources we developed as a result of this process to help instructors considering the integration of GenAI into assignments. The first resource is a decision-making flowchart. This was developed to support the process of considering whether to integrate GenAI into an assignment or not to do so. It asks for key high-level questions, starting from 1, academic value add and ethics. Value add is around contribution to and support of learning outcomes. Ethics is around meeting PIA and cultural appropriateness, for example, Indigenous content. 2, the second question is around guidelines. Have guidelines and expectations been clearly communicated with students? Are students clear on academic integrity boundaries within the assignment? And so forth. The third question is around critical assessment. Are students able to critically assess the output and scaffold upon it? And last but not least, the last question is around metacognition and reflection. So in other words, have opportunities been presented for reflection on the learning and the learning process as well? A second resource that we developed considers questions for assessment and/or activity design in terms of value add to 3 main categories, which are learning focus, learning experience, and instructor experience. These questions serve instructors in reflecting on their motivation and intended outcomes for using GenAI as part of the learning activity or assessment. Now, not every design task will take into consideration all the bullet points listed here. It is really up to the instructor to identify their priorities. However, the first point in each category, the one bolded, can serve as a starting point to ensure alignment with the course and the centering of learner and instructor needs. Additional considerations can be chosen, of course, based on course content, activity, purpose, and instructor preferences. Once again, these were two quick overviews of a couple resources we developed to help frame and use the many questions that came up. Now, without further ado, I'm passing it over to Andrea and Anita to share about their experience in a writing assignment.
Thank you, Abir. Hello, everyone, and thank you for participating in today's session. I apologize, I have a cold. I will try my best to speak clearly. As you know, my name is Andrea Salagi. I'm a sessional lecturer in the Department of English and Cultural Studies, as well as the Okanagan School of Education. I've been working with English language learners since 1997 and have been teaching composition classes at UBC since about 2007. This past year, I had the opportunity to teach 3 sections of English 109, Studies in Composition, which is an enhanced course. I had about 90 students with 30 students in each section. English 109 is a full year or 2-term course that gives learners an extended opportunity to develop university-level writing skills. Most students take the course as a way of fulfilling their English requirement. And this past year, my sections included students in all years, first, second, third, and fourth year students, and in various programs. Approximately 15 to 20% of the sections were international students. The course itself aims to advance communication abilities in rhetoric, critical analysis, grammar, and documentation, with emphasis on research-based writing, academic integrity, and academic literacy. So I believe there were approximately 9 sections of English 109 this past year, with 3 instructors and Anita as our coordinator. We all followed a very similar syllabus, and the assignments included summary writing, response essays, comparative analysis, evidence-based reflective essays in the form of portfolios, a research project, and a final exam, as well as weekly in-class assignments. Excuse me. In terms of Gen AI and how that impacts assessment, I felt it was important to learn as much as possible about AI and how students are using AI in their academic work. I attended numerous webinars on the topic and found several useful resources, which I'll share in the end. I learned about this wonderful opportunity to collaborate with CTL and Anita to hopefully make some improvements on the way we approach assignments and assessment in English 109 and other university writing courses. In my classes, we spent time discussing the ethical and unethical uses of Gen AI in the context of university writing. We experimented with different prompts and then analyzed through class discussions the outputs. I learned very quickly that AI does a very good job of summarizing texts. And since the course includes 2 summary assignments, there were some challenges that arose there. So following is an example of a typical English 109 assignment. And for this original summary assignment, students were asked to read an article and use the 5 stages of summary writing from the textbook, including identifying the main points of the text, using language of attribution, practicing paraphrasing and quoting, and writing objectively. So I will pass it over to Anita now to discuss some of the revisions that took place to this assignment that include the use of Gen AI.
Thank you, Andrea. Right, let's get this moving. So before talking about the revised assignment, I thought this is work in progress, of course, recognizing that is important. And it's equally important to recognize that the revision process took into consideration the current course learning outcomes of English 109. In the summary assignment, we have typically referenced course learning outcomes 2 and 3 that focus on employing close reading strategies and gaining an introductory understanding of academic forms and styles. To present an AI-informed practice, we see that in our current English 109 syllabus, The course learning outcomes 8 and 9 are also pertinent. Learning outcome 8 ask students to identify and evaluate controlling, supporting ideas in a text, dominant rhetorical patterns in a text, tone, context, and features of style that the authors would bring to the text itself. And number 9 on or to show evidence of critical thinking. Therefore, shifting the assignment focus for us meant that we maintained the learning focus by asking students to not only employ close reading strategies, but also evaluate those strategies. Next, to promote inquiry and authentic practice, we want learners to focus on task engagement and peer collaboration. And I'll talk about how each of these come into play in the assignment itself in the next slide. The usefulness of generative AI tool is a new component that we added, keeping learner experience in mind. We also considered potential barriers in asking students to use a generative AI tool, and how those in some ways how those challenges could be mitigated or addressed, at least in a classroom. And finally, student agency was really important, not just recognizing it as a theme, but also making it a part of the assignment expectations and the assessment criteria. And the real-world application of a summary assignment itself. Therefore, the revised assignment considers both learner and instructor experience in the way in how we approach reading a text to begin with. So the first aspect, I begin with the student agency aspect and how it can be addressed. In the revised summary assignment, we see that students can be asked to self-select a text, but the criteria are provided by the instructor, and criteria such as topic of a text, length, academic source, credibility checks, etc. The next one is on focusing on task engagement and collaboration and asking students to work in groups. Now, this seems like a straightforward process in asking students to, just divide themselves up into a certain number of folks and work on a particular text, but it takes much more learning to recognize how the roles will be divided and what kind of collaboration is needed for writing a summary. Use of generative AI tool, and the highlighted use is something I'll come back to later, is an important component, as I mentioned before. So students can use Copilot or their choice of a generative AI tool to generate a summary of the text. So the point to note here is that for the summary assignment, we are in fact allowing as instructors or inviting students to interact with a generative AI tool and have a summary that has been created for them. But we don't stop at that. We ask them to next demonstrate a reading strategy. So based on the summary generated and their reading of the text, we ask students to next create, and I've highlighted create here again. I'll reference Bloom's taxonomy next. So students create an academic poster and select sections of the text. And selecting sections of the text is not so much about copying certain aspects of the text and putting it in the poster, but rather considering, evaluating, analyzing what their reading has demonstrated and the strategies that they have used to decide on what parts of the text is important and why. So those parts are decided, of course, in conversation in class with the instructor really guiding that discussion. And the poster will include, of course, the AI-generated summary and present as well the purpose of the original text, thesis, audience, organization, and language use that contributes to the coherence and cohesiveness of the original text. So from an academic or from summary writing, we are also incorporating academic poster being created. And the last one here in the revised summary assignment is about evaluating strategies, reading strategies, and the critical reflexive use of artificial intelligence. So students use the poster as a format, as a backdrop to evaluate their understanding of the reading in class, and they critically reflect on the summary generated by Copilot. Copilot is something available for use at UBC, but it could be any other in discussion with the instructor. And what 3 changes the group will introduce to improve it and why. And of course, the conversation could go in a different direction, that Copilot has produced a perfect summary and how, and really recognizing what are the features of a summary that are acceptable, that need to represent the text in a certain way, and of course, the length, the various other criteria that the instructor would have included in terms of the text selection will become relevant here. Okay. In the next slide here, I talk about the criteria. So having talked about the revised assignment itself, the assessment criteria very similarly considers how would we assess student agency. And of course, that falls back on the criteria that the instructor would have created on text selection. The choice of text itself can be marked and graded on certain aspects that the instructor considers as valuable. Applicability could be one. Focusing on task engagement and collaboration will look at peer work closely and the engagement or the engaged work that they demonstrate in class. And it's not just in class. Much of the work could be done out of class, and appreciating that time and labor is important, of course, from the equitable learning aspect. The third item about use of generative AI tool itself can be marked as a completion point, recognizing that it is a machine-generated summary, and the relevance of it will be considered later with demonstration of the reading strategies and evaluation, of course. So demonstrating reading strategies can be assessed by looking at the application of the genre. Now, recognizing that we are not just looking at one genre, but a few different kinds. So it is the summary that has been generated as one type of genre, of course, but it's also the academic poster format that they are utilizing and the presentation that they are making, and an academic presentation, may I add, in class. So application of these various genres is relevant from the assessment perspective, and the creativity with which the presentation is organized. Citation and attribution is absolutely important. It's an important learning outcome, in fact, for English 109, and use of APA style therefore comes into play. The final piece of the assessment criteria considers if learners have understood the material and how, and the reading itself is therefore presented in different ways. So it's creatively presented in the poster, which becomes the backdrop for the presentation. The succinctness with which the summary has been presented or generated by an artificial intelligence tool, but how they have succinctly presented it verbally during the presentation is of importance. So it's not so much about rote learning or memorization, but demonstrating their understanding from the different ways in which, or the different ways in which knowledge translation is happening, in this case, vis-a-vis one authentic text that they have read. Effective use and application of academic genre, I think I mentioned that already in class presentation in this case, is something that can be graded effectively. And the style of presentation and how the work has been spread out amongst peers is another important criteria in terms of engagement to consider and assess. Now, in this slide, I kind of show some of the opportunities and challenges that have emerged in revising a summary assignment. It's a basic writing assignment, but in English 109, there are a couple of turns that students get to perfect their summary writing skills. So in a typical scenario, this is the grading rubric that we have used, where we grade based on the content, how students demonstrate close reading of an academic text, demonstrate coherence and cohesion in their use of transitions and writing conventions at the university level. And language use, of course, and use of a variety of vocabulary, sentence structure, grammatical aspects are considered in terms of impediments that they may cause in communication or how it affects communication skills. So revising this and considering the Bloom's taxonomy was pertinent. In previous sessions that I have attended, discussions that we have had, it has presented for us that the summary oftentimes, or the way we have approached, remains in the very lower category of remembering certain, having read it, remembering, taking notes and understanding, showing understanding in those notes that one would have taken on the sidelines of the reading itself, and of course, bringing and explaining that into or demonstrating it in their summary itself. With this assignment, we are looking at, or we are still keeping the introductory aspect of a summary writing skills intact in some ways, where generative AI's capability has been put to use, and students are using it to have a summary generated for them. But then again, they have the opportunity to think about what is it that has been generated for them. And in thinking about it, that critical aspect kind of jumps it a few rungs in the Bloom's taxonomy pyramid here. And we are looking at evaluating it from that point of view. So selecting and supporting evaluating rhetorical features of academic writing. So the selection of parts of the text that they are highlighting in the academic poster that they utilize for a classroom presentation itself will demonstrate or evidence what parts of the text they have selected or what features of the text they are choosing to highlight for the assignment. And finally, of course, they are creating certain different genres, or they are invested in a genre awareness as well as communication skills. And it's not just about written communication skills anymore. There is a multimodal aspect playing out for them, for instructors as well. So the instructor is not just reading things that are produced, they are also receiving or looking at information that has been curated, collated in a way that is visually motivating. It appeals to the audience in very many different ways that a text should. Okay, some of the other criteria. Moving from the grading rubric itself, I also have 3 other items here. Student agency, task engagement, peer collaboration, and critical reflexive use of generative AI. Student agency, I'll talk about opportunities first. And in creating an opportunity for students to engage or sit down not just with themselves and consider how they are approaching the reading and understanding the reading by simultaneously using a generative AI tool, which they can individually generate and then come together and discuss as a group and maybe pick as a group, select the best one they think works for them. It's the collaboration that's highlighted in this case, and really considering or being mindful of academic integrity in selecting something that's been generated by a tool, but considering why that particular instance of summary by ChatGPT or Copilot works for them, or works for how they're going to talk about it in class and the challenges that the summary might represent for them. So there is a very critical facet for students to think about what generative AI tool has spouted for them and what might be reasons for them to use it moving forward in other courses or other assignments, the tool itself, or not, or what aspects they might have to revise and reconsider moving forward in their academic or professional lives. Task engagement and peer collaboration, kind of I mentioned in relation to agency already, but it is also the multiple steps lead to incremental learning. So thinking about reading the text to producing something utilizing an artificial intelligence-based tool, to then coming together and putting the material together, individual reading as well as groupthink into an academic poster takes a lot of creative effort. The visualization or the knowledge translation process itself is higher in the Bloom's taxonomy, primarily because it takes a lot more effort from the instructor to explain how to go about doing it, particularly at the first year level. And the expectations from that academic point of view is important. So really directing the peer collaboration, the goals and objectives of the peer collaboration itself is important and of value. And finally, the critical reflexive aspect that generative AI allows for is a big opportunity. So something that has been created by a tool to consider how that creation itself is flawed or has certain benefits, has facilitated reading a difficult academic text in a discipline that students may or may not be familiar with, are all good things, good challenges to have, I would say. It's a good practice in critical thinking because it creates it's like reading somebody else's text to consider, oh, they have written it or they have created it really beautifully, and how. And presenting that understanding before the class is, again, I think enormously beneficial, because in authentic, in real world experience, that's what we are constantly doing. We are listening and reproducing knowledge and adding our own understanding, feedback, etc., and broadening the scope of a topic. So it is quite effective from that point of view. Now, challenges. So the one challenge that I see is of the number of ways. So instead of grading one summary that's based off a reading that students would do, the instructor is really now effectively looking at multiple items that need to be graded. So they are not just looking at the generative AI summary. Even in giving a completion point, they have to consider what the summary has been, if students have really thought about the summary that's been generated, utilize cues appropriately to generate something that's reasonably valuable and relatable to the text that they have read. It's also the peer collaboration and the group work that the students will need to do in preparing an academic poster. The academic poster itself will be graded by the instructor, and of course, the final presentation will also be graded. There's also the knowledge translation as well as knowledge synthesis aspect that comes into play with this revised assignment. And grading that is also a new feature of a summary assignment such as this. So several levels of assessment therefore comes into play. The challenge also is of, how we are talking about the use of generative AI as if students are already prepared and they know how to use it effectively. They probably are not. They may not be. I mean, increasingly, students may be able to use some of the tools, particularly if they are free and available to them. But there's always the need for training and support. Who would be providing the training and support? Is it up to the instructor to teach them how to use Copilot effectively, or ChatGPT effectively, or any other tool that comes into the market next? And Gemini is already there, but I'm sure there are more different kinds of bots that are being developed as we speak. So who has the responsibility to really prepare students to be mindful about their selection, the ethical use of it? Now, academic integrity, of course, has been considered in building this particular assignment, in recognizing that there are parts of it that allow for the use of generative AI, But then again, there are certain expectations in terms of discussion, etc., that need to be reflected in the assignment as well, and therefore will be assessed as well. So I would keep it at that. Those are definitely clear challenges that emerge for us. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Andrea.
Thank you, Anita. I'm just aware of the time here, and so I will try to go through the next couple of slides as quickly as possible. We wanted to just briefly share one of the weekly in-class assignments that I used in my 109 sections. This was a Canvas discussion about students' thoughts, reflections, and experiences regarding Gen AI. And students were prompted with the following questions. Have you used Gen AI? If so, in what capacity? What were your experiences? What are your thoughts on how Gen AI will impact or change your university writing experiences? And how do you feel about instructors using Gen AI to mark your assignments? The discussion was very interesting. 61 students posted a unique reply to this discussion. They were also asked to reply in a thoughtful way to at least one other person's post. Only 6 students had not used Gen AI, and these were the most commonly reported uses for it: to improve grammar, vocabulary, and sentence structure, to brainstorm an outline, to summarize texts, to provide feedback as a study buddy or tutor, and to do research. Most students were against instructors using AI to grade assignments. In fact, 32 were against, 17 were in favor with reservations, and 6 were in favor with no reservations. Many students replied that they use Gen AI for summarizing, not just for English assignments, but for complex concepts in other courses, or to distill key information from lectures or textbooks. And as we know by now, Gen AI is here to stay. Anita and I are working hard to explore options to appropriately incorporate Gen AI, or to make modifications to assignments without compromising the learning outcomes, of course. I will jump over the next slide. This one is just some other options in terms of different ways of using Gen AI. The source is noted on the bottom. This was a YouTube video case study, and it was very interesting. It will also be in the resource list in the next slide here as well. So that concludes my portion. I am more than happy. These are just a few of the resources I've collected. I have quite a long list. So if you're interested in more, if this is just, you're just starting to learn about this, I'm happy to share my resources, including some interesting podcasts on the topic and that sort of thing. So thank you very much for your attention, and I will pass it on to Yves.
Thank you. Let me advance the slide here. So I want to talk a little bit about how we use Gen AI in some of the assignment in different classes. Before I do that, I just want to explain a little bit the limitation of Gen AI. So my name is Yves Lucet. I'm a professor in computer science. And when I look at a tool, I like to understand a little bit what it's doing. So what we call AI is mostly machine learning. And this is really a technology that's been built on what we call supervised learning. Essentially, you get a bunch of data where you know the input, and you're going to train your algorithm using this, what we call neuron, and you advance them into more complex network, and then you end up with something like that where you're going to optimize, and that's my research field. I do research and optimization. So you get your data, you're going to optimize, create some weights, and which is going to use to predict, and from there you can compute what's the difference between your prediction and what the data is. This is really supervised learning. This is really the foundation of what we end up calling generative AI in the end. The next term I want to really explain a little bit is that generative in the generative AI. So we have essentially 2 different kind of algorithms here. There are some that can discriminate. So give me a picture, I can tell you if it's a cat. And we have what we call generative, where we give me a bunch of pictures of cats, and then it can generate a new one, which is just an interpolation of the different cat images. So the technology are different here. I'm not going to go too much in details here. The point is generative AI is a lot more complicated than the discriminative AI that we used to have in supervised learning. We have to capture the entire distribution to be able to generate new data. Then the next step we need to define is what's this language model and large language model, and then we can get to what generative AI is. So the language model is really to use that supervised learning to try to predict the next word in a sentence. So you give me a sentence and you're missing a word, and then learning a bunch of words from the internet, I can try to predict the word. And this is again built on supervised learning. So if you train a very large volume of data, you end up with what's called large language models, an example being ChatGPT. And the Gen AI model is just built on that. So it's going to try to predict the next word, then the word after that, and keep doing that. That's really what it is. Now, the amazing thing is that it's so efficient at doing it, but it does have limitations, and I would like to keep them in mind. The first one is that the algorithm does not understand the word. It's just predicting word one after the other. There is really zero understanding what the words mean. The second one is there is no causality between the different concepts or different words. This is just a machine, a very large correlation engine. And it does, very good things, but don't expect it to have any kind of correlation inside. It does have other limitations that you can work around. Bias and fairness, I think by now everybody have heard about it. And then the quality and the coherence, like it does some hallucination, create facts that do not exist at all. And that should be a little clearer now that you understand what the generative AI is actually built upon. So knowing all of that, what do we do with it? So the next step is we have all these engines and we say, oh, we're going to write a prompt and it's going to give us some answers. And there are different techniques you can use to actually get better answer. The classical one is the RAG, the Retrieval Augmented Generation. It's an interesting one because now if you go in Copilot and you say, oh, give me an answer about that, it's not only going to give you an answer, but it's also going to give you a link to, oh, this is where I got the information from. How does that work? Well, the way it works is you write your prompt and then your Copilot is going to take the prompt, then it's going to do a search on the web or any kind of stack documents and retrieve documents from there. And then from this document, it's going to enhance your prompt. And then it's going to query your Gen AI engine from there. That's what RAG is doing. And that's how we can actually give you not only the answer, but also links that to contain these answers. The fine-tuning is another technique which is a little more advanced, where you say, well, if you have one of these Copilot, then you want to deploy it in a course, then you can try to fine-tune it on all, for example, the textbook and second-year university students in computer science major. So I'm teaching data structure. I can fine-tune it on a bunch of data structure textbooks so that the answers are a lot more relevant. Lastly, a technique that a lot of people talk about, but I haven't seen really people saying what exactly you mean by prompt engineering. So prompt engineering is really a bag of techniques. Some of them are here, but there are way more than that. So one is called a persona. So you want an answer and you're going to ask, well, you're going to answer to me like act as a security advisor, security reviewer. You can also say, well, fill in the blanks and provide a template. You can ask for a recipe, give me all the steps, and so on and so forth here. I really like the refusal breaker because in some cases, Copilot say, well, I can't answer that. But you can work around it and say, well, if you can't answer it, provide an alternative question to which you can answer. So all of these techniques are part of prompt engineering, and they make up what we can do now with Gen AI. So I've been also looking at different seminars and say, where can I use, this large language model in my teaching? And I've seen several very interesting projects here. One of them is called Sherpa. So I'm going to talk a little more about one of the courses I'm doing, and I'm using a technique called team-based learning, and in which it's a flexible learning techniques. I ask students to do their readings, and then they come to class, they assess on the readings, and then we can do interesting stuff. The challenge is, of course, how do we check they've done the readings? So I have a big stake here saying, well, you are going to be assessed, you're going to be graded on it. But the student asks, well, how do I know I did the reading correctly? So we need some kind of reading guide. And that's where the Sherpa project comes in. Essentially, he asked the students to actually do the reading and provide an oral summary for 10 minutes. Then the Gen AI is going to translate that into text. Then it's going to correlate what the right answer will be from the instructor, and then provide some meaningful feedback to the students. It could also be used for grading, but that's really not the point here. It's more about providing an interactive, personalized reading guide to the student. So that's a very interesting technique that I hope to deploy in the future. Other thing I do in my class is peer evaluations. So team-based learning is putting students in teams, and at some point, I need to know how the teams are performing. So I've seen projects using Gen AI that say, oh, I'm going to take all the feedback from the students, feed that into a machine learning model, and then provide feedback to the students. Okay, so it could be summative or formative. Some people really push it to say, oh, I can even assign a grade. I'm not a big fan of doing that, but if it can provide meaningful feedback to a student will be great, or even if it can put students in beans, telling me which teams deserve, the more support, and which teams are doing great and they don't deserve more of my time. So then I can focus my time on really the group of students that really need the more help. Lastly, GenAI has been used in teaching for content generation. It's really great at generating syllabuses and course plan. You can try that. I'm assuming a lot of people have tried it. There is a project here called about assessment creation. So the link will be in the slide. It's an interesting one where you can provide your content and the GenAI is going to produce a quiz for you. My only modulation I would say here is just make sure you double check the answer, because I tried that in several quizzes and the answer was just plain wrong until you actually guide the GenAI to the right answer. And lastly, marking assignment, and don't think it's really ready for that, but it can maybe put students in beans and then allow the instructor, the TA who are doing the grading, to actually spend more support time on specific group of students. So in that sense, I think it would really help the students to get more focused support. So what I've done in my class, in 2023 term 1, I was teaching the data structure, which is a second year computer science students, second year course for computer science major. And this is using team-based learning, so assigning readings and asking students to actually report on the readings, and then we do exercise in class. What I did in that course, I told the student, look, you can use GenAI to write your code. I don't care, use it. The only limitation I will put is you cannot take the answer from GenAI, just post it as your answer, because it's not your answer and that falls into academic integrity. But if you want to get help in your coding, that's fine. I'm perfectly fine with it. In any case, some of them are probably going to do it, so I may as well generalize it to all the students. I was kind of surprised at the time that several students mentioned they were not even aware of ChatGPT, so not all of them know about it. The students were not really wowed by the ChatGPT and its coding prowess at the time, but I think the model really improved since then. The part I'm really concerned about the course is in class, we're doing problem-solving exercises, and I know that if I copy-paste that in ChatGPT, it can provide a fairly good answer, which will be, short-circuiting any kind of learning from the students. And that's the part I'm really concerned about. So far, I have no indication that it occurs. And part of it's a little hard to do it in class because they're in teams. And so if the team wants to do it, all 5 people in the team have to agree. And they're in class, and there's kind of an intimidation factor knowing the professor just walking around. The other course I deployed is a 4th-year comp sci course called Parallel Computing. And it was very interesting and really saved me a lot of time here, because that course used different programming language and technologies. If you don't know parallel computing, that's fine. The first technology is called OpenMP, then another one is CUDA. It's just programming on the GPU, and then you get different kind of technologies. And for some question, I told the student, well, you know what? Here is the problem. You can use whatever technology you want. So one technology may be better, or they may all be performing at the same level. That's fine. I just want you to provide a solution. Now, for me as an instructor, that means I need to provide solutions in 5 different technologies. And that requires a lot of time to write a solution, then test them, and then just be able to actually assess all of them. But that's where ChatGPT was actually performing extremely well, because I could write solution in Java, for example, and say, oh, write the same solution in OpenMP. And it was extremely efficient at doing that. A few bugs, but mostly saving a lot of time doing that. So that was really great and saved me a lot of time. Lastly, the last course I tried GenAI was in a course in our Master of Data Science, which is the professional master course-based. And in there is a 1-credit course on optimization, meaning mathematical optimization. And the assignment I asked them to do was about hyperparameter tuning. So essentially, when you have a machine learning model, you are going to use optimization to train it. Everything we call about training is really running an optimization algorithm there. And I thought it was really interesting because they were in the Master of Data Science, and using optimization, this is one of the great direct applications of optimization in machine learning. But instead of giving them a full assignment, which was, okay, you need to answer that question and so on and write code for so on, I told them, look, here is a question for Copilot. Write the question in Copilot, get the code, make it work, fix it, and then you're going to submit your code, an explanation of any fixes you've done, and then a reflection on did Copilot save you time? Will you use it again? So that was the assignment. And the answers were interesting. In terms of the fixes, there were a lot of small fixes, like the parameters in the code generated by Copilot were wrong, or they had wrong values, or they have a few parameter value to adjust. There are a few things that were outside the code. So the code was not running because the package was not installed, or importing the package the syntax was wrong. A couple of hallucinations where the Copilot suggested a library that really did not exist. And then the code quality had a few issues where they used deprecated code or redundant code. So they had to do, I think every student had to actually do some fixes, which was interesting. And then the way they fixed them was also interesting because some of them just rewrite a prompt. So they say, well, Copilot gave me something wrong, so I'm going to reprompt it to actually give me something better. Other students just dive straight into debugging. So there are different strategies there. After several reprompting, I think one student said, well, the solution was perfect, but it took some effort to do that. But most students were extremely successful in completing that assignment. The reflections essentially said, and they were really almost a consensus, where everyone said, well, it saved me time, especially prototyping, generating just the base code, or just for routine tasks. But he had some limitation in terms of the complex task or edge cases. There was also an interesting one because I didn't impose the language. I said you can use MATLAB or Python. Every student used Python except one. And the student who used MATLAB complained that Copilot suggestions were not really great. And I think that really comes to the fact that there is a lot more code in Python on the web. So MATLAB is kind of a small language issue where Copilot has less data to actually work with. The main reflection was say, this is really great, but I need to have a solid understanding of the concept and the question to do the assignment. If I don't know what I'm talking about, writing a question in Copilot is not going to help. So all the students reflected that they need the foundational knowledge to actually be able to complete an assignment and use Copilot effectively. So what I'm taking away from there is that really thinking about the assignment, and the assignment was actually extremely well positioned. It was the last assignment in the course. They had a full lecture on it. So they really had that foundational knowledge to be successful in completing the assignment. So that really amplified the satisfaction of the students. The other part I will note is, well, it was for master students, which as well, they were more mature students. They already completed the bachelor, so they have a lot more maturity to actually handle the tool. All the students reported they save time, but as an instructor, creating an assignment usually takes me, I would say, a couple of days, depending on the assignments, but usually between 2 and 5 days, depending on the complexity of assignments. In that case, for this assignment, it just takes me literally, I spend more time thinking about how are we going to use Copilot than actually writing the assignments. So that's really a huge time saving for my instructor. I will definitely keep that assignment and improve it. I need to precise it based on the feedback from the students. Require them to use Python. That would be the first one. And that they can use reprompting. There was also several students complaining that I asked for Copilot and they really, really want to use ChatGPT because apparently it performs better when you're doing coding. So next time I will put it more, GenAI neutral. Other projects I will keep working on. So I'm going to teach again data structure in the fall. And I want to really provide the answer a little bit like Anita Andrea did. Just provide an answer from the GenAI and ask the student to criticize it. I think that's a great learning exercise here. I would really like to implement that Sherpa tool to actually provide instant feedback and helping them with the reading guide. I may introduce more specific assignment like I did in the optimization course, saying, well, here is an assignment. The only thing you have to do is query Copilot. But at the same time, they need to be able to do debugging and writing code. So that requires a little more thinking, but I was surprisingly happy for a first draft of the assignment I did in the optimization course. I will also teach a 4th-year course where I will keep telling students they can code whatever way they want. They can use GenAI. That's not my issue as long as they take full responsibility for that assignment. That's really all my project. Last thing I would like to outline here is that GenAI is really in its infancy. So this is the hype curve that some of you may know about. This was really estimated by Gartner, which is really a well-known management companies, and they're doing all this prediction on IT all the time. And so last year, they estimated GenAI is probably at the top of the peak of inflated expectations. So we're at the point everybody say, well, if you got a problem, throw it to GenAI, you're going to get a solution. This is completely unrealistic, and this is going to crash at some point, and then it's going to climb up and go and then plateau, and then the technology is going to be a lot more mature. The interesting part I found is that Gartner estimated that GenAI is going to be mature in 5 to 10 years from last year, so 4 to 9 years. So we still have a long time to go with that technology. And there is a lot of things we can experiment with it. I think it's really going to be another technology that is going to enhance learning, provided we use it right. And there is a lot of pitfalls. In my case, I think, well, the first time I deploy technology, it's never perfect. There's plenty of mistakes. So I'm still learning from it. But I think it's an interesting one that I do plan to keep using. So that's all I will say on it. Thank you so much for listening. And I will pass it back to Abir.
Thanks. It's actually Barbara now. Thank you.
Fine. I'm going to take over. Rather than go through, I made some notes on. Thank you, Andrea, Anita, and Eve. I did take some notes on what aspects of this reflection questions that you were touching upon as you were speaking, but I would rather open it up to our participants for chat questions. Please, you can direct your questions to the whole group or a person in particular, and hope we can, in the short time remaining, we can have a conversation. And if you have follow-up questions, we can also, you can respond via email. Okay, so I see Bowen is inviting you, Eve, already to talk to our alt funding group to brainstorm ideas on LMS in effective teaching evaluation practices. Okay, we have a thank you. So what questions do people have? Okay, Bree says her thank you. All right, how everybody's using GenAI. Don't tell me you have no questions. Everything was explained so well. Yeah, Raymond notes that it seems like most people are focusing on changing assignments rather than detection. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that? I know that academic integrity, even though it wasn't mentioned directly, is at the focus of everybody's kind of work in the background. So who would like to...
I can say a quick word here. I mean, my focus is really on enhancing student learning. I don't really see my job at policing what students can and cannot do. So it's all about the learning. Honestly, I think policing, it's a losing battle. And we are going to have tool detecting it and then tool detecting the detector and so on. So I'm really not interested in spending any time on that. It's all about, can I enhance the student learning? Can I actually provide more personalized attention to students? And if I can quickly detect a student benefiting the most from the support, that would be better. I mean, the good students, they don't need much support from me. They know what they're doing. It's really about the students struggling that I think GenAI may help in that context. And it's also a technology that the students don't look at it that way, but it's going to be higher level of learning. They don't feel that way. They say, oh, it's going to save my time, summarize things. Yes, but that means you have more time to think. And I think that's really the part I'm really interested in. It's not about remembering all the syntax for all the libraries. I mean, we know we have tools to do that. That's fine, but that problem is solved. But what are now it's going to be more about the design of the code, the architecture. How can I put these things together? And that's really the interesting problem-solving questions.
I kind of agree with Eve there. And I just wanted to add that I think with the assignment at the first year level, both Andrea and I are trying to promote academic integrity and seeing learning integrity as different ways in which tools and affordances can be used, really. So if it helps students have a good, solid learning engagement to use generative AI tools in their practice, I think that's a better learning opportunity than negotiating and spending a lot of time on how generative AI cannot be used.
Mm-hmm. Great, and I see some comments, some other comments and questions. Alex, I like the embrace of ChatGPT in computer science courses. As a recent undergrad in computer science, I can say I both wish I had a tool as powerful as it is. It is only a tool, though. Same as a UI or ID, it's there to help. And has anyone found if Copilot is more useful, better for certain use cases for teaching and learning versus the other LLMs? I think, Eve, you mentioned that some students wanted to use ChatGPT instead.
Yeah, I had some mixed experience with Copilot. I mean, in most cases, it's doing great answer. There are a couple of cases where it actually give me really buggy. I mean, it's answer the same word over and over again until it maximizes output, which I was, wow, that's interesting. And I asked the same question to a ChatGPT, who gave me a perfectly valid answer. And it was not a tricky question. It was the usage of semicolon versus comma in English, something like that. So something trivial, which really remind me that, look, this is software, it's going to have bugs, okay? Like any software. So we need to be aware of that, and we need to be responsible for the usage.
Great, thank you. I already responded about the recording. We will share both the recording and the slides. It'll be on our YouTube channel for the CTL, as well as the wiki for Celebrate Learning Week. Let's see. Thank you for okay. Thank you. I feel like this is like using Google. Some kids are not good at using Google to search info already. They may still don't know how to ask questions and prompts properly, like the guiding students to think of it if AI helps, right? Which is also what faculty on this panel today did. They had to really think about if I'm going to incorporate generative AI, why am I doing that? How does it align with learning outcomes, etc.? Let's see. Thanks. Michael has a comment too. Michael has also found Copilot a bit buggy, right? Yeah, it's supposed to have ChatGPT in the background. Emily points out it could depend which mode you use. We have the balanced mode, maybe poor. And then there's the creative. If you're logged in, then you have the choice of the creative mode as well. So, yep, thank you for everybody. I think we are at time. If you have further questions, you can put them in the chat, or you can also, here's everybody's email. They're also on the slides, and we'll have the resources on there, and feel free to reach out if you'd like to collaborate with the CTL or with any of our presenters today. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of Celebrate Learning Week, and get it out there and have some sun as well. Thank you very much for joining today.